The net worth that I've created, which is well over $1 million now, was from investing. It wasn't because I made a lot of money in my day job. If you put in $100,000 invested by the time you're like 35, if you never added another dollar to that money, that could be roughly $1 million by the time you retire.
I don't really manage my finances. What do you say to people like me who have deferred personal finances to somebody else and they're like, I just don't know enough about it?
You never know what could happen. Getting let go from a job, divorce, death. That is not the time where you want to be learning about what's going on with your money. I don't want you to go through that situation where something happens and now you're like, where are the accounts? How are they invested? What does that mean? The time is now. Like, if you're listening to this, this is your moment. This is the message that I want you to receive, to make a decision now, make a commitment to be part of your financial journey so that if/when something happens, you're able to take care of it.
Welcome to the Superhumans podcast. My name is Ina Coveney, and I am here with Tess Waresmith. She's a financial educator who has amassed a $1 million net worth, and she's not even 40 yet. So we need to talk to her about exactly how she did it so that you can go and do it too, and you're going to see how doable this is. Tess, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and this couch.
I know, like,
My goodness.
Feel it. This is luxury.
It's luxury. This is luxury.
$100 on Facebook Marketplace, but luxury. I am so happy to see you.
Likewise.
I'm going to tell you something. Oh, before we start, can you please just tell everybody, because I'm going to get ahead of myself. So much to talk about today. Can you please tell everybody, what is it that you do and who you help right now?
Sure. So I am a financial educator and I help women in transition, mostly women in their 30s and 40s and early 50s that really want to take control of their money, want to grow their hard-earned money through investing. And so my goal is to provide digestible, accessible, I like to use the word finance bro free education that helps you understand how powerful investing is and how you can do it even if you are just getting started, if you're allergic to math, if you only have a little bit of money. So my goal really as an educator is to break down the barriers that help regular people learn how to invest because it really is accessible. And especially with women, I think we have more barriers. Some of them are limiting beliefs, and it's really important that we educate and help more women understand because it's such a powerful tool to build wealth.
Yeah, you were just featured in Business Insider. And I'm going to put the link to that article like right below in the show notes so everybody can go and check it out. But you tell the story of where you came from and how you became a self-made millionaire at 36 years old. And I discovered something in this article that I didn't know about you. And that is that you got a scholarship to college because you did springboard diving.
Correct.
And I just because I am going to show this on the podcast because people need to see what this means. I'm about to show this to you so you can react to it. I am going to put this up on the screen on the YouTube version, but I am showing you a video of you doing legit Olympic style springboard diving. And for everybody who is listening on the podcast, this is her getting to the edge of like a 15 feet, 20 foot tall springboard, making a huge jump up in the air, doing like a triple sow cow or whatever that is called, triple flip in the air, and just flawlessly going right into the water in a single line without splashing a single drop. Can you please react to this part of your life that I had no idea about?
Oh, I'm reacting more to the fact that you went on YouTube and you found this video, which I love that you found. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was a big part of my life. I mean, I trained in diving from the time I was 8 until I graduated from university, and I really wanted to make the Olympic Games. That was my big dream for sure. And it was something that I was pretty certain was going to happen for me. Like I really believed in that dream, and there was a time when it was on the table, and then, a few injuries later kind of changed the tide for me. So it's actually a little I'm so grateful I did that sport because it opened up so many doors. It taught me so many lessons in terms of, the parallels between business and sports are plenty. And so I learned a lot of really valuable life skills from that. But right now the Olympics are on, right? And
Yeah.
it's always a little bit painful for me to watch the Olympics because I know that there's another parallel universe where I definitely make it. But I will also say I've done some incredibly cool things in my life that weren't the Olympics, and that might not have happened if I went that way. So, it's all good.
I do want to like stay put salt on the wound a little bit, but I don't mean to do that. But I do think it was such a big part of your life, that, and I'm sure there's people listening right now who identified with something that they were doing or something they were being at a certain point, and then that didn't come to pass, or that didn't happen for them, and they found themselves pivoting to something else. And like you said, like, it's a little bit painful watching the Olympics because you're seeing like the sliding doors version of yourself and like what happened. And I just want to speak to those people who are going through that kind of transition, who are like, what I thought was going to be my life is just not. Can you speak a little bit to what those feelings were when you realize that, these injuries are just not going to make that dream possible?
When I was growing up, the sport of diving was such that most of the Olympic team was pretty young. So the sport's changed a lot. Now you can dive later in life. There are people making the Olympic team that are in their late 20s and 30s. When I was diving, you were sort of over the hill in your early 20s. And so I accepted it begrudgingly because I was graduating from university and I really didn't see myself trying to come back from injuries and train another 4 years in adulthood. That's a huge sacrifice. And then, what if you don't make it? So I would say the story doesn't really end there because I ended up picking up another sport a few years later, Olympic style weightlifting, and I reached the national level of that sport. And that was also a sport where I thought that there might be an opportunity for me to compete internationally. I got injured again. And so my identity was so tied up in being an athlete for so long that I think at some point I really forgot that I have so much else to offer the world. And this entrepreneurship journey and running my financial education business has been such a blessing because it is a complete departure from athletics. I think most people would have thought I would have started a business around fitness. And a lot of times I go to conferences and people are like, "Oh, do you have a fitness business?" Because I still work out, so I'm still relatively fit some days. But I walk for exercise now. I'm not the athlete I once was. And that was really hard to let go of. But letting go of that really made me realize all these other things that I'm good at and able to give to the world, but also gave me more space to spend time with people I love and be present for that time and enjoy the little things. So it is such an important lesson and a hard lesson to learn when you work so hard at something, even if it's a job, right? It's why people stay in like toxic jobs for a super long time because they get really caught up in the company. And I know a lot of people in that situation where their identity is tied up in the company they work for because they've been there for 10 years. And so anything can become your identity if you let it and it becomes all consuming. And when you are able to step back and realize that you have so much more to offer, and I know that I don't even need to know who you are. I know that you're not one dimensional. None of us are. It's an incredibly freeing moment, but it can take a long time. It's not easy to let go of those identities.
How do you go about finding something new?
I think the first thing you have to do is create space and not force it. I think there was a lot of time where when I finished one sport, I'd be like, what's my next sport? What's my next sport immediately? And the more that I took time to just exist in the white space, that's when some things that I didn't realize I was pretty passionate about came to the forefront. And even with financial education, this business started because I was grieving and I didn't have an outlet. And I realized that I was really passionate about financial education. And in my free time, when I created enough white space for me to actually spend some time on something, I was reading finance books. So that's how I figured it out for myself.
Why finance books? Where did that come from? It could have been knitting, but why finance?
A couple of reasons. So, one, I've always been very intrigued by the power of money, and I've always been very afraid of money. So, I grew up not feeling like we had enough money, being told that we didn't have enough money. And in hindsight, we did. We were middle class, but I definitely grew up with the scarcity messaging that we certainly didn't have enough money to live whatever lifestyle we wanted. So it probably started there, and then throughout throughout I would say even high school, as soon as I started like having initial jobs, I liked having money because I felt like it gave me options. I could buy stuff I wanted. So that's probably where it started. And then the real catalyst for it was later in my life when I started investing in real estate. I, at the same time, found a financial advisor, and I had saved enough money that I knew I wanted to grow it and invest it. And I gave them a lot of my money and just said, please make it be more. And I kind of turned around and stopped paying attention. And several years later, I would realize that this advisor wasn't investing in my best interest, that I was paying a lot of money in fees for below average performance. And when I realized how simple it could be to invest, that made me so much more interested in really learning more about investing. And then I wanted to share it. And in fact, I would say I felt morally obligated because I felt like I had uncovered this crazy truth that everyone should know. Every woman should know that you are totally capable of learning how to invest, and you don't need to pay someone an arm and a leg to do it for you. And there is something so empowering about taking control of your money. So that's really where it started for me. But it really started with the initial understanding that something was wrong with my existing relationship with a financial advisor. But I would also say one conversation. Like I remember a friend being like, when I was telling them about this situation with a financial advisor, and they were like, why don't you just do it yourself? And I looked at him, I'm like, what are you talking about? Do it yourself. I'm not an economics PhD. I can't like do it myself. And then he taught me a little bit about it. And that 30-minute conversation sparked this whole other journey in my life that led to wealth and knowledge. And now I feel very morally compelled to share it with everybody else.
Why don't we start there? I'm gonna tell you what like my feelings are, and I feel like they're echoed by a lot of women out there. I'm very average in that sense. I don't really manage my finances, right? My spouse, when we got married, I used to actually had a situation with an financial planner situation where I sat down with them. It was like a discovery call, right? And they said, hey, if you pay us, I don't remember what it was, $600, we will help you track your expenses and your income and help you save more. And I saw that and I'm like, well, that sounds like something I can do myself. So thank you. But so I went on in search for figuring out how to save. And so I did that. I created a massive spreadsheet because that's the kind of person I am. And I would track every single expense, every single income, and it finally started making sense to me where my money was going. Then when I got married, my husband was using Quicken, and he was just as meticulous about his finances as I was. So it made more sense since our finances were going to be together, that he would take care of it. So since then, I haven't looked at our finances. And since I have gotten further and further away from that personal finance day in and day out, I have become of that same mindset of like, wait, but I don't know enough, right? I don't know enough about this. There's people who know more about me, more than me, and there's people who can do this better than me. There's people who can go and invest our money and they get paid the big bucks because they know how to do it. So I'm hearing this I don't know anything mindset. And when I heard you speak, because I went to one of your workshops and I heard you speak about this, I'm like, oh, that sounds like me. And you made it sound so doable and possible. So, what do you say to people like me who have deferred financial, like personal finances to somebody else, and they're like, I just don't know enough about it?
I would start by creating a definition around the purpose of money, which is to create security, safety, independence, freedom, options, flexibility, impact, influence if you're a business owner. All of those things are incredibly important. And money is a tool to help you get those things. And until we assign a level of importance to money, then we're not going to prioritize it. And I think there's a bunch of reasons why most women don't prioritize learning. There's two different pieces of this, right? There's the cash flow piece, the actual like money coming in and money coming out, which a lot of women do pay attention to. And then there's the investing side, which is taking that money and making sure that it's working for you. I would say, first of all, unfortunately, you never know what could happen. I work with a lot of people in transition, getting let go from a job, divorce, death, healthcare issues. That is not the time where you want to be learning about what's going on with your money, right? Those are horrible situations that are probably inevitable in most of our lives in one way or another. So while it's not necessarily your fault if you're not taking an active role in your money right now, I would strongly encourage you to do so, just because I don't want you to go through that situation where something happens and now you're like, where are the accounts? How are they invested? What does that mean? Where is this money? Like, there's a basic level of understanding that's required to make sure that you are going to be okay no matter what happens. And so while it's not your fault, it is your responsibility to do that. The other thing I would say related to that is it doesn't take as much time as you think. And I love this example of driving a car, right? Most people have driver's licenses. We went to driver's ed and we got a car. We're not mechanics. Like, we don't know how the engine works, but I can drive that car really well. And I took driver's ed and it was fine. And that is honestly a good metaphor for investing and understanding how your money is working, because to understand the basics of the stock market and to make sure that your money is multiplying for you, like the money that you're working so hard for, to make sure that it's multiplying for you requires a driver's license. It doesn't require you to be a mechanic, but most of us think we have to be the mechanic, that we need years of education. And so those are the messages that I would share with somebody like you. Is one, I think it's risky not to understand it. I understand psychologically and emotionally that it feels like a lot to like dive into your money, especially if somebody else is managing it or you've never dove into it before. That I totally understand, but it makes me scared. And the longer I am a financial educator and the more women I talk to, the more I want to get that message across, that the time is now. Like, if you're listening to this, this is your moment. This is the message that I want you to receive, to make a decision now, make a commitment to be part of your financial journey, so that if/when something happens, you're able to take care of it. And furthermore, especially if you have children and especially if you have daughters, you want to be able to teach them the basics. And I know that might sound crazy. You're like, I don't even know the basics of investing. How do I teach my kids? Again, you're going to have to trust me on this. Back to the driver's license. You need a driver's license. You need like a few weeks of driver's ed and a couple books. You don't need to go back to school to get a 4-year degree to invest successfully and understand the power of investing and how that can really change your life.
So can I share with you, after your workshop, I went home and I was of this mentality like, okay, I need to get more involved in my finances. I need to know more. And I was scared without any foundation at all. I just added that fear to myself. I was scared that by telling my husband, hey, I want to know more, that he would take it personally, that he would be like, well, don't you trust me? Don't you think I'm doing a good job? Have I not been doing it? And my husband has been doing an excellent job. For the record, if I can say that, can we create a reel right now of like, my husband is doing an excellent job with our finances? I was afraid that he would take it personally. And it turns out that he was like, yes, yes, I want you to know these things. And I'm like, so Tess said,
this is where I get in trouble.
said that we should probably have our savings, have a ton of savings. We should have our savings maybe in a high yield savings account. Maybe we should try something like that. And my husband goes, what makes you think we don't already? And I'm like, oh, we do. That's great. He's like, yes. And I'm like, and do you know how much they charge for fees for our investments? Like how much the fees are? And this is me very timid because like I don't know what the words that are coming out of my mouth are. I don't understand what I'm saying. Yeah. And like, do we understand our fees? And he goes, you know, why don't you ask our wealth manager? Just send him a message. And by the way, our wealth manager is the guy that manages our retirement accounts and all that stuff. And he went to school with me. Like I met him when I was getting my MBA. He's like, call Liam, ask him questions. go. He's like, I free you. Go do these things. So I want to say, like, I had a pretty successful story of going back home and
I
really
love
starting
that.
to get into it. But what about women who are afraid? What about women who are scared that this is going to be taken the wrong way by their partners and that they should really just, you know what? I take care of the home, I take care of the kids, you take care of the finances, these very traditional roles that sometimes we all fall into
Yeah.
anyway, even if we're not looking for it. What would you say to women that are just scared that this might ring the wrong bells?
I mean, I think it's scary in general to look into your money and investing because it's this whole other language that feels really complicated. But by the way, once you understand the language, it becomes much simpler. You just need someone to explain it to you and in plain English, right? So that's the first thing is it might feel scary to you because you don't have like a basic education. In which case, before you have that conversation, find a way to get educated. I have women that take my beginner investing programs on their own so that they can feel more confident having an intelligent conversation with their partner.
Mm.
I think that's a great way to do it, or pick up a book or whatever. I will say that if you're scared and you approach your partner delicately as you should, the response that your husband had is the correct response. If there's anything but encouragement, that would be a massive red flag to me, potentially a larger issue. The other thing I would say is I often have women take my programming that learn the basics of investing, go back to their partner, and their partner doesn't actually know as much as they thought that they knew. And that happens all the time that I don't want to like single out dudes here, but like your boyfriend or your husband or whatever talks a big game, but like maybe doesn't understand as well as you do now that you're educated.
Mhm.
So if you are nervous about that, I would suggest that you find a way to get an education. There are millions of ways to do that. We can include books in the links. I have free workshops all the time. I have a beginner investing program that's 4 weeks long that you could take where you would learn all this information and then feel more confident to have that conversation. And so I think for you, we did that one workshop, right? So you had a little bit of context, but not a lot. If you had gone through the program and then approached your husband, you probably would have been less nervous
Mm.
because you know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. But then I would say, if the response is negative, like please be really honest with yourself because there's a few possibilities. One is that it is like an ego check, right? Like your husband or partner just feels like, you're trying to take control or they feel criticized, whatever it is. So you need to like anticipate that to some degree for sure. But you also need to know that there is a possibility that they don't know as much as you think they do. Just because you're not educated about it doesn't mean that they are. And the last thing I would say is there are situations where it does become a bigger issue and that there is some kind of financial infidelity, which is a real problem. And so I would say to trust your gut on that one. Like if that conversation doesn't go well, like don't give up on it because this is your money too. Especially if you're managing your finances together. And if something happens, you need to know what's going on. Like if you guys if something happens and you break up, you're responsible for the good or the bad, whatever is there. So it's critical that you have a basic understanding of what's going on.
Why don't we give people just a little bit of a taste of a super basic thing that you feel like, we should all know? It doesn't require us to go to driver's ed necessarily, but like there's something really, really basic that everybody needs to know. For example, what I just mentioned about high yield savings accounts.
Yep.
Can you please tell us what that is? Because when I heard it for the first time, I was like, what have I been doing with my life for the past like years and years with my savings? Please tell everybody what this is.
Sure. We could start with high yield savings account and then I have one more for you. So a high yield savings account is a savings account that gives you a higher return than your typical brick and mortar bank. And even if you bank online, any of the big banks that are very popular, they are what I would consider just a regular old banking savings or checking account. Those accounts usually give you an interest rate of 0.03 pennies on the dollar. There are accounts now called high yield savings accounts, which give you a much higher interest rate that's tied to the market that can give you a much better return on your money. And it's risk free because it's still a savings account. So, right now, the time that we're recording this, you can put your money in an online savings account, in a high yield savings account, and get a 5% return on that money compared to a 0.03 or whatever it is, which isn't necessarily going to change your life, but that's potentially how, depending on how much money you have in there, hundreds of dollars a month for really doing nothing. And these people tend to shy away from these sometimes because they don't trust an online bank, but all these online banks are FDIC insured, meaning that up to $250,000 of your money is insured by the federal government. These accounts take 5 minutes to open. So if you have a bunch of money in your checking or savings account that you aren't like actively using, putting that in a high yield savings account is a no-brainer way to give yourself a little bit of extra cash every month. And that is like the number one thing. Like if you're listening to this, that is your homework. Go open a high yield savings account. You can even Google. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to like go look for a bunch of different ones. Google top 10 high yield savings account, insert the month that you're currently listening to this, and you'll find a good one. It doesn't have to be complicated.
And I want to second this because I I do manage my own business finances. And I've always kept so much in savings, like so much. That's my operating capital is the stuff that I have in savings. So I did do the research after your workshop. I went back, I'm like, can I find a high yield savings account that I can use for business? And it was actually incredibly hard to find one that was specifically for business. In fact, I went through the terms and conditions, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but if I'm talking to business owners right now, I went through the terms and conditions of the accounts that I was seeing the offers for online, and the terms and conditions said, if we know that you're using this for business, we're going to shut you down. Like this is a personal account. So I finally found one that was for business, that they let me open it for business. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes so that everybody can go and get it. And for full transparency, when you sign up using that link, you actually get a 0.5% more in that you get a little bit of a bump in the return that you're getting. And I get that too. So there's
Love that.
right. So I get a little bit of that too. But it actually does help you because I think it's a 0.5% bump that you get. Like it's so much better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's so much better than what you're getting in your checking account, just that little bump. So I'm gonna put that link in the show notes so everybody can go and get it because that really took me a while to find. But for personal, the offers were plentiful. Like it will not be hard to find a high yield savings account for personal. And I thank you so much for like bringing that to my attention. Because something that I saw in the Business Insider article that you were featured on, which by the way, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is incredible.
Thank you.
When I was doing my homework, I saw that you had up to $45,000 in savings at one point, just sitting there. And I could relate to that so much because for the first several years of my business, I would keep everything in savings. Actually, first few years of my business, up until I saw your workshop a couple months ago, I'd keep so much money in savings and just do nothing with it. All it was doing there is just paying taxes on itself. That's what my money was doing for me. So I know that you went through this too. So $45,000 in savings.
Yeah. So this was one of the hard lessons learned. The first one being giving my money to somebody else and not understanding the basics of investing was number one. But number two was holding too much money in cash. This is partially a scarcity mindset thing. Like I'll be honest, I think I'm still healing the wounds of that. But between 2010 and 2015, I held $45,000 in cash that I did not need. And this is actually a good segue into a basic thing that everyone should understand about investing. And that is that the stock market is cyclical. Some years it goes up, some years it goes down. But over time, it has gone up on average by 10%. If you want to subtract for inflation, like 7 to 8%. During the time that this money was sitting there was 2010 to 2015, right after our major global banking crisis, right after the recession, right? So recessions are a good thing if you're investing because you get to benefit from the stock market going back up. So during that time period, the average return of the stock market was roughly like 14 to 15%. So if you were investing during those 5 years, you basically could have doubled your money in like very simple investments, nothing fancy, no trading, no picking the right stocks, just the average return of the stock market would have been roughly around 14%. And so when I did that math, the $45,000 should have been like 90. after those 5 years if it was invested in the stock market. So what I would say is the lesson there is we don't understand the power of compound interest. And unless you are a financial nerd like me, you wouldn't. You have to spend time with a compound interest calculator to understand this. And most of us understand conceptually, we put money in, it grows a little bit more, and then we get a return on that larger amount of money. But what we can't understand unless we actually look at the math, and again, there's calculators for these things. So if you're allergic to math, this is not a non-issue. Just Google compound interest calculator. But if you put in, let's say, $100,000 invested by the time you're like 35 at a 7 or 8% interest rate, if you never added another dollar to that money, that could be roughly $1 million by the time you retire. And it's hard to even like comprehend those numbers. And that's why when people don't invest more because they don't think they have enough money, small amounts of money over a long period of time can lead to massive amounts in the future. You can 10x your money over a 30-year period investing in the market, but we don't have a concept of that. So we don't think about, oh, is it going to make a difference if I'm investing an extra $200 a month right now in my 30s and 40s? The short answer is yes. It could impact your retirement by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's the one thing I would want everyone to understand is we know we should be investing, but I don't think not anyone. I don't think a lot of us, and certainly me too, like I didn't really understand this until I went down this personal finance rabbit hole of what it means to invest and what that actually looks like over decades. It's not a get rich quick scheme for sure. And if anyone tells you that, they're selling you snake oil, but it is the single most powerful mathematical equation on the planet. And you don't have to be a genius to use it. You just have to put your money into very simple investments over a long period of time. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Obviously, there's a few more steps, but again, you need the driver's license, not the mechanic's license.
I do want you to talk a little bit about making money overnight and getting rich quick. Can we talk about that? Because when we hear, right, Tess has a $1 million net worth, right? We are here thinking that Tess has $1 million sitting in a bank account somewhere, right? So I want you to explain what net worth is and where it comes from and whether I should be listening to this podcast just to see how can I get rich quick.
Yes, great question. So your net worth, when someone says they are a millionaire, it could mean a few different things, but net worth usually means your assets, which is everything you own. So that includes savings accounts, retirement accounts, a home, anything like a car, anything you own minus anything you owe. Those are your liabilities, right? So any kind of loan, mortgage, student loans, credit card debt, etc. For me to get to this place was well over 10 years of consistent investing. That is still relatively short amount of time. I think the average millionaire is in their 58 or something. It's certainly early for sure, but it was very intentional and very consistent. And I only made over 100 grand like a couple years during that time period. But I invested a lot in the stock market. I started investing in real estate. And I would say the majority of the net worth that I've created, which is well over $1 million now, was from investing. It wasn't because I made a lot of money in my day job. And that goes back to the power of compound interest, right? Net worth is a really important metric to track because it is a way that you can figure out if you're heading in the right direction. So at any given time, you should know this number. And there are great ways to do this automatically, tools online that will allow you to aggregate all your accounts in one place so that you can get a picture of where you're at. Like I don't go in and calculate this manually. Like I'm all about like the easy button. So I have all of my accounts connected to Empower, which is a free dashboard, $0 I pay for this. And I can see, what my houses are worth, what my mortgages are, where all my investing accounts are. I can also see all the charges on my credit cards. It's such an easy way to start to take control of your money. And if you already have the high yield savings account and you're looking for another next step, this is a great next step because this is a easy way for you to get clarity on what you have and understand where you're at now. For some of you, that's number's going to be negative and that's going to feel painful. And unfortunately, the only thing I can say is thank God you know now, because then you can start to make steps to correct it. And that is the hardest part. Like we were talking about earlier that, you were scared to go talk to your husband. A lot of people are even scared to look at their money, which is fair. If you haven't been tracking it and you have no idea where you stand. But I will tell you that even the women I've worked with that had no idea where they were and figured out that they had a negative net worth, first of all, over the course of a few years, many of them are net worth positive now. And then it's an incredible feeling to understand that you have only one direction to go, which is up. So I think calculating your net worth is a really good financial metric to, and when I say calculate, I mean automate it, make it easy for yourself and check it once a month is a really important step that everyone should take. And if your partner is managing your money, that is something you should definitely have clarity on.
Yeah, I totally see that. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for, 'cause I know that you've just blew a lot of people's minds and they're going to be running home to figure out how to make their money work hard, a little bit harder for them. I do have 2 more questions for you. Number 1, what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have of you as a millionaire?
I would say that there's probably 2 things. There's probably a lot of people that think I robbed a bank or I inherited it. I would say that. But I am very honest about my privilege. Like I did get that full scholarship and that is a massive head start. So I'll always be honest about that. But I think the myth is that like my life will change in a lot of ways. Being a millionaire is different than spending $1 million. And when we think millionaire, I think we think of somebody that is out there, living a lavish life. I drive a Subaru. I rent right now. Like I always looking for like discounts online. So, I have that net worth and I'm so grateful for that. And I want that money to stay in the market and grow. So it's not like I'm living off that money. So I would say that's a common misconception. Of course, like I'm super grateful and I have a lot of flexibility in my future because I already have that invested. But I'm not actively using that money all the time because I want it to grow and I want to use it to make a bigger impact and influence in whatever I decide to do in the future. So I would say that it's probably that my life looks a lot different. I will say from a safety and security perspective, it's incredible and I'm very grateful for that. But I don't like while out. Like I don't get 5-star hotels all the time. Like I don't do any of that. So
Yeah.
the beautiful part of that for me is the time and the freedom and the choices.
Yeah. And finally, if everybody who's listening had to do one thing in the next 24 hours, what do you think that thing should be?
So it depends where you are in your investing journey. But one thing I would suggest that you do is I have a 3-day mini course and calculator set that's called Journey to Financial Independence. And you can calculate what your net worth is. You can calculate how much you're investing now, and you can start to play with the compound interest calculator. And that's all in one little mini course called Journey to Financial Independence. I would do that because that will create a lot of clarity on where you are right now. It might feel scary, but it's a good next step that you can take that's not going to require years of time. There's 3 videos, they're 10 minutes long, and there's some calculators. Go use them and see where you're at. And I promise it'll spark something for you as a next step or give you information on where your knowledge gaps might be and what you want to work on closing next.
Say the link out loud so people can hear it.
So it's moneyconfidentcoach.com/3daysfi.
All right. I'm going to put that link in the show notes so people can go and
Perfect.
click on it. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for blowing everybody's mind on everything that they need to be doing right now if they really want to be in a solid financial ground. So you're the best, Tess. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
And thank you for coming on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and tune in to the next episode. Bye.